Good evening, everyone. I'm going to start the meeting tonight. This is a meeting of the Children's Services Overview Scrutiny Committee, and this is the first meeting of the new municipal year. So I'm going to start by asking members to nominate a chair for this next municipal year, please. Yes? Are there any other nominations? Can I have a raise of hands if you're happy to elect Andrew? Just the committee members, Joe. Andrew, you've been elected chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then we'll move on to item 2, which is the election of the vice chair. Are there any nominations for the vice chair? Yeah, Chris.
Can I nominate Councillor Jane Ainsley, please?
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? No. All in favour for Jane? Congratulations. So Jane is elected as vice chair. Thank you. So do we have any apologies for absence?
Sorry, Estelle Cavalry.
Estelle Cavalry, thank you. And then on to item 4, minutes from the previous meeting. Does anyone have any comments about the minutes of the previous meeting? Can we all vote in favour of going through that? I wasn't. Thank you. That's agreed. Then item 5, declaration of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? Yeah. Yes, Moses.
I have an interest for Part 2 Oak Bank. Oak Bank. Yeah.
Thank you. And then item 6 is public question time. So we have one question. I don't think he's here to ask it, no. But I will read the question out and answer it and also provide a written response. So the question was from Craig Dominic. So the question is, were the committee surprised by the outcome of the recent Ofsted SEND inspection that there are widespread and systemic failings leading to significant concerns about the experiences and outcomes of children and young people with special educational needs and or disabilities, particularly when the SEND updates and dashboards presented to the committee appear so positive. For example, where EHCPs issued within 20 weeks of referral is described in the dashboards as timeliness, a figure of 68%, such as for Q3 on the last dashboard, can appear to be quite positive, particularly next to a positive direction of travel. However, if explained as that in 32% of cases the council failed in their legal obligation, it does not sound so good. Likewise, the legal requirement for the council to carry out annual reviews has not been achieved in over half the cases, although this information is not provided in the main SEND dashboard. What chance do children and young people have when even the most basic legal requirements are not being met? If the SEND department is unable to identify and admit the failings, then how are they going to be able to fix it? So thank you for your question, Craig. So the findings in the recent Ofsted SEND inspection are serious, and it's right that they raise concern. I want to be clear that neither the committee nor I underestimate the significance of the issues that have been identified, particularly where they relate to experiences and outcomes of children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities. You are right to point out that the performance information can sometimes appear more positive when presented at a headline level. Measures such as the percentage of educational health and care plans issued within 20 weeks are often described in terms of improvement or direction of travel. While this is important, it does not change the fact that when statutory timelines are not met, for example, in around a third of cases, this represents a failure to meet our legal duty to children, young people and their families. As a committee, we'll continue to focus on the quality of EHCPs as well as timeliness to ensure a fuller picture of outcomes for children are presented. Similarly, we recognise the legal requirement to complete annual reviews has not been met consistently, and that's not always been as visible in high-level reporting as it should be. So to answer your question directly, the inspection outcome is not something to be ignored. It reflects a real and significant weakness in the system, which in the area specifically relates to delayed provision of wheelchairs, which is an NHS commission service, the quality of data and the delivery of health contributions within educational health and care plans. The evaluation of the local SEND system has been clear that improvements for children across the area are emerging, having started from a historic low base that requires whole system change. The 20-week timescale for any HCP to be completed is reliant on all partners contributing their part within the required timeframe, which then allows the local authority to complete the plan on time. The inspection report highlights areas of progress which have not yet translated into consistently good experiences or outcomes for all children and young people. There are multiple factors that impact on a child's ability to access education, and as a result, this area SEND inspection is much wider than solely focusing on education, health, and care plans. It considers how the whole partnership across all schools and early years and further education settings, health, GPs, hospital, community trusts, and public health systems, care, and the wider system work together to identify needs early, provide the right support and improve outcomes for children and young people across Woking and Borough. The SEND and inclusion strategy makes clear the ongoing commitment to working with children, young people, parents and carers in holding system leaders to account in terms of delivery. To this end, our parent carer forums sit on the committee for the local authority and also on our health and wellbeing board, where our integrated care board are also represented and can be called to account. There is a clear recognition that all members of the partnership must be transparent about progress, and this is key in terms of rebuilding trust and confidence in our area-based SEND system. This element is reflected in the second area of priority action, which relates to completing a joint strategic needs analysis to help support strategic decision-making and address areas of priority to collectively improve children's outcomes. Work started on this well before the report was published and is making good progress. There are two other areas for priority action in the report. The first is that NHS colleagues in the Integrated Care Board must urgently put in place a recovery plan for the wheelchair service. And the other is that partnership must put in place a plan to improve our EHC plans, particularly with regard to aligning them with health contributions. So since the inspection, the approach has been strengthened by performance information presented in a clearer and more balanced way, including where statutory duties are not being met, increasing the level of scrutiny and challenge through governance arrangements, and appointing an independent chair to hold our SEND system to account for delivery across the whole partnership, focusing on the delivery of the priority action plan at pace, particularly working on the NHS to support our recovery plans, addressing issues of timeliness, annual reviews and the quality of EHC plans, strengthened quality assurance so that data more qualitatively reflects the lived experience of families, and a commitment to increasing the sufficiency of school places with children with SEND throughout the borough. I fully understand and share the concern behind your final point. Children and young people deserve a system which reliably meets their needs in partnership with parents and carers. Working to address the whole system reform and an acknowledgement that things need to change in areas of improvement built upon and sustained for our children and young people. The committee will receive regular updates as the progress of the transformation and reform for children and SEND and seek to provide constructive challenge on future action plans. Thank you. We'll send a written response as to Craig for that. So the next item is town and parish council questions, but I don't believe there's no councillor questions. So on to item 9, which is the executive councillor update. So I'll pass over to Prue.
Where do I start? So almost everything in children's services is suffering upheaval at the moment as government policy changes in almost every area that is within children's services. So we've got widespread change in social care and a complete reconfiguration of all our social work teams, which I'm sure will come out later on in the update from the officers. A complete change of location for staff as well, who are moving back into Shoot End, so they're sitting together, supporting each other and identifiable as a team. I think that's quite important. We've got all the SEND reform stuff going on at the moment. We've got the family hubs opening. We've got just managed to put off an adult education inspection. Emma pointed out the lead is not available for part of next week, so they couldn't come and inspect us next week, which they've accepted. I don't think there is an element of children's services which is not affected by government policy change, some of which is coming out in unhelpful timetable way, which makes it very, very difficult to provide not a meaningful plan. I mean, officers are working their socks off to get things to the deadlines that are prescribed for us. So there was one deadline last week for the families first, is that the right terminology? Families something. Yeah, best start in life and babies, which we don't get any funding for the babies part. This week it's the final deadline for the SEND reform plan. But the part of the guidance for the experts at hand, which is a component that only came out on the 5th of June, which is not helpful to the preparation of that plan. This is a national scramble to get everything done. It's really putting a lot of pressure on officers at the same time as we're trying to improve. I do want to say something about the inspection. It was an honest inspection, I think, of us. If you read in detail, we can see where they can see the improvements that we as a local authority have been making. We're not consistent, and we absolutely accept that we haven't got, it's green shoots. It's not a perfect delivery, but we are making those movements. But there was a systemic failure in the wheelchair service, and I think the thing that, reflecting on it, the thing that most upset me about that was the fact that we had no clue that that was the case. There were normally when you have a problem like that, we've got warning signs, we've got other indications, we have complaints, we have, parental noise, we have none of that existed, and yet the system had completely failed children, and we were not cited on it. It's obviously not our system. We have a partnership agreement. We act as a partnership, and as a partnership, we did not know that this was the case, and that is the most upsetting thing not to know. I think if you know about something, you can do something about it. We have done something about it now, I think, both as a partnership and a local authority. But that aside, I think it was a fair reflection of where we are, that we are making progress, probably not from a low base, I think, is the answer to the question, right? We've still got a long way to go, but we must push on because the children need a better SEND service across the whole country, and I'm still not convinced that these reforms are going to solve everything. I think the principle behind the reforms is correct in that we must have more inclusive practice. We must tackle things as soon as it becomes apparent that a child has an additional need, and to try to prevent that need escalating, and in the best interest of the child to include them with their peers and work like that, and keep still have an element of specialist provision for those children who do need it. But without enough money in the system, without enough people, without the workforce really that's trained to deliver that, without the capital provision to actually build the buildings, even if you build the buildings, you still haven't got the workforce, and the parental trust in the system is not there either. So parents are not panicking exactly, but you can see the signs of concern about whether this means that their child is really going to get the help that they're going to need in the future. There's a push, there's a fear that if their child has needs, and it'll be more difficult to get them in the HCP, and that will mean that they won't get the help, because that's been the experience of parents for many years, that they feel like they've had to push to get diagnoses and EHCPs in place, or nothing happens. And to turn around that whole system so that people trust that they will get that support when they first ask for it, and that we, not just us as working, but that the whole system will be able to provide that support when they first ask for it, is a huge, it's like turning around a super tanker. And I'm still not convinced that everything will, by 2028, will be perfect and ready to go, and sorted, and will make the absolute difference that we need it to make. So we will strive away, doing the best we can to make that happen. But I still think it's going to be a challenge for everybody, and a lot of hard work in the next few years. Let's hope it does make a difference for them. Apart from that, I don't think there's everything else I think is covered in the thing, except I wanted to publicly thank all the staff for all the work they've done to get all these various plans and required submissions in, and to respond to the consultation on SEND, which was done at the same time as the plan. All massive pieces of work, plus the GSNA, which we're going to hear about later on, and all the other things that are going on the action plan. So I should think everybody's exhausted, and thank you very much, everybody, for all of that.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Prue on that at all? I just had one brief. I was interested in what you said about the, and it might be something we come on to a bit later, about the talking about the wheelchair service and the idea that there was no clue in that. Was that because parent, you know, if there are issues, parents weren't raising that, or, you know, I guess my question is, yeah, if there were big issues, how could that not be noticed? And do we feel confident that we know how to identify that now?
I think we do feel confident now that we've got all the children identified. It was a bit of a struggle. Part of the, there's a national issue with the Children's Wheelchair Service with the provider that had previously been raised in Parliament with sort of slow mobilisation, slow and not providing very well. But we were not aware of the extent of the problem locally. And quite a lot of that is to do with the way that records were kept, and a lot of them are still on paper. So it was very difficult for them to identify exactly which children needed what when. That's, some of that is still needing to be untangled, but we are confident that we have identified all the children that in Wokingham, and indeed we helped galvanise, identify the children in West Berkshire and Reading as well, who were all affected by the same ICB as us, the same integrated care board on the NHS, to make sure that we had identified every child and that there is a plan for every child, which was not in place before. So we are confident now that we are on top of this. But it was very interesting because normally you will get parents raising things, but Send Voices also confirmed they hadn't had anything. Clive Jones, as the MP, had one family, and he'd raised that with the supplier, and he was beginning to get somewhere, but that was all he'd had. So we don't know whether those parents were just resigned to a long wait, or whether they, you know, what their expectations were. I don't think we know that. Why it didn't surface, and I think there were people who were working with the children who were concerned about it and had raised their concerns within their organisations, not in this council, but hadn't appeared at the top of that organisation either. So yeah, I think there are a lot of lessons to learn about that.
I don't know if it's a question for Prue or generally, but when I read it, I was a little bit like, wheelchairs? Really? It never entered my head that it was a thing that would affect the inspection. Of course, when you stop and think about it, of course it would, but I didn't know. And I wonder, for knowledge more than anything, understanding the crossovers. So we look at certain things in here, but we don't look at things like that. But we should probably be aware that issues like that can impact Thanks. The area send inspection is exactly as the answer to the first question. It is across a local area, and it is all services that are supporting children with additional needs or who learn differently across that local. So ranging from GP surgeries, early years, through sort of schools and settings and hospital trust. So it is and I'm not sure that when you read those reports, you fully comprehend the breadth. It is a 3-week inspection, and which is why the issue of data is so key. And it's a joint inspection between CQC and Ofsted, so it's health and also Ofsted. In terms of the legal responsibilities, in terms of Prue and myself hold in our roles a legal responsibility, which is why we have been asked to act as convener in that, but it doesn't mean that necessarily you hold all of the responsibility, or we hold the responsibility, but the levers and accountability sit across the system, and which is why it's quite complex and wide ranging. And yeah, I think we can do some work to help explain, but it could be that this committee asks, in terms of any update, for us to be joined by our health colleagues when we come and report on given that shared accountability, which is something that has happened in other areas, and is something to consider for future reference.
I think that's really important because, and it comes on to my second question actually, like I got caught completely off field and had no idea, and then you sit here and you think we scrutinise so much here, but what don't we see and what can't we influence, and we should actually understand that even if we can't influence it. So I think that's a really good suggestion. And then when I read it, like, I will go as far as to say heartbroken actually. I felt heartbroken on behalf of the team here because we know we've got a lot more work to do, but the kind of feeling we've had over the last 6 to 12 months is we've made good progress, things were moving in the right direction, and then you see that and it's like, oh, I really, really felt. And so my question is, I guess, around well-being and how the team are doing, because there is so much going on with all the reforms, and then you've had this on top, and I just wanted to check in that the team were okay.
The team are okay. I think our first thoughts are with parents and carers and children and young people, and however the feelings that we may have on a day-to-day basis for some of our parents and carers and for children and young people, it doesn't compare, and so we will not stop until, and we will remain relentless in our focus in terms of improving those outcomes, and we will be looking after staff as we progress within that, because as the report does highlight, there were certainly some positives noted and green shoots, particularly in terms of the investment that the local authority has made. But we have to reflect that this is an inspection that covers all of those areas, all of those agencies, and it is incumbent upon us to work as a partnership and mobilise that in the right way. So, yeah.
And I would expect you to say no less, and I would expect your team as well to talk about parents and carers. That's why I feel I have a responsibility to take a step back and ask about staff.
Thank you. Any other questions for Prue on that? Thank you very much. So we'll move now on to item 10, the education and send update. So is that
we obviously already touched same area. We have more focused report later, alternative thing, education overall report. So what we're going to do, I think we are still member of the read report. Those are mainly about non-same area like our education, school performance. Other area we cover like skill or need to eat. Now is a big topic. How we get involved in that area. I just wonder whether we have a new head of service, Julian Cole's replacement, Magic here. So he's going to talk about education bit. I can chip in.
Yeah.
But mainly we'll leave time for you to ask questions.
Yeah, so you guys have had the reports.
Sorry, if you can just press the button.
Oh, sorry. I'm not used to it too. Yeah, you've had the reports, so to give you some headline figures, if you have any questions you want to ask, please ask questions. So yeah, so we've got a new framework, Ofsted framework, which came out in November 25, and the Education Partnership team are continuing to support schools through understanding, through workshops. We've had a few inspections in the borough since the last time we met. We've had a secondary school it's inspected, and we've had a few primary schools. Generally, overall, all our schools are coming out as expected, as minimum, generally expected, with quite a few areas of strong around inclusion, personal development, and early years are coming out to be quite strong generally in the borough. We only have one secondary school which was inspected, and it had a needs attention for post 16 for a number of reasons, but it had a post 16 attention needed. It's not a fail, it's just a revisit. That school will get a revisit within 2 years' time or sooner to look at that particular area. I've highlighted here, we've looked at reports nationally. So whilst our schools in the borough are getting mainly expected and strong, we looked at schools nationally, secondary schools, who were inspected, which were inspected in the first 2 weeks of May. We looked at about 54 schools, and generally speaking, our schools are performing better than the schools, which you'll see some charts here. So in inclusion, we've got what most schools are being graded as nationally is expected, but a number of schools are getting attention needed, which isn't the case for our schools, primary or secondary schools, which is really good for us. Curriculum and teaching, again, most schools are getting expected, but some schools are getting attention needed. Again, that is not the case for our schools, which is a really good thing for us. And you can see from the other areas, achievement, attendance, personal development, leadership, post-16, where schools nationally are scoring, mainly around expected, but there are a growing number of attention needed. So just reflecting back on our schools, it's a positive picture for us. Looking at primary schools, again, most of our primary schools are getting expected or strong, and we don't have any exceptional at this stage yet, but we do have expected and strong. But the national picture is showing, again, the main area is around expected. That's the main judgment area most schools are getting. It's not comparing it to previous inspection framework where it was good, but it's generally is expected. But we are seeing for curriculum and for achievement, a number of schools nationally are getting attention needed in those areas. So we are supporting schools through workshops, through visits, through understanding the framework. So that's the general view of the national picture and the local picture in terms of inspections. We have a number of priorities in the Education Partnership team. So we have around 16 maintained schools, all primary schools, which are maintained. All of our secondaries are academies, and a number of our primaries are academies within a multi-academy trust. So we are looking at working very closely with the 16 schools, doing collaboration activities. The white paper does say that there's no deadline, but it does say that it would like all schools to form some kind of collaborative trust. Our schools have indicated at this stage they would like to work with a local authority. They would like to explore what a local authority trust looks like. There isn't any guidance nationally yet, but our recent interaction with DFE a couple of weeks ago suggests there will be something coming out by the end of the year, I think. So we will look at that and we will share that with our schools. So one of the issues we are working with our schools is around looking at their budget deficits, because a lot of our primary schools have got some are in deficit, basically, and we have a plan to support those schools to reduce those deficits over time. The adult education, Prue already mentioned, we had the call yesterday or Monday, I think it was Monday, we had the call, and we've had a deferral. That's been granted, which gives us more time to prepare, because we weren't expecting the inspection until November, I think it was. We were expecting the inspection, so, but it gives us more time to prepare for that. Yeah. Another area I want to highlight to you is we are at a very early stage, but we are looking at developing an education belonging strategy with school colleagues, education colleagues, but also reaching out to colleagues in health and social care, looking at co-producing an education belonging strategy. So that's something which we can report back at a later stage when we've got a more clear idea in terms of scoping and what a plan looks like. I think
the remaining part, okay, as I said, that I still remember already read the report, what a highlight area need to eat, how to help young people to join. That's another area of local authority statutory duty. They call it the participation duty. I leave for you to answer the question. I think I don't need to go through that.
Yeah, two questions. So again, it was, I don't know a lot about it and we don't really talk about it here, but the adult education inspection, what are our expectations around that? Like you're saying, you're glad you've got more time to prepare.
Yeah, we've got a very experienced, we have a very experienced adult education manager. She's very good. She has a small team, and the team are very good at what they do. We had the call yesterday from Monday, the 90-minute telephone logistics call from the HMI, and the adult education manager said, because the inspector asked, where do you grade yourself? Where do you see yourself? And in all areas, I think she was a little bit modest, perhaps. In all areas, we're looking at expected, and I think she was saying towards strong for inclusion. But I think that's something which we need to support her with, making sure that we've got case studies, we've got examples, we've got the evidence there to suggest that we are at least expected, if not strong, in some areas.
I think that credit to Ofsted, that they have a very thorough, a good approach when in our first meeting. It's very different from things, especially, I mean, he always played back what we told him to say that did I get your message right or not. We really appreciate that. At one point, actually, we correct what he understood. To answer your question, Jen, I think we quite well prepared, but we are very careful to check everything to make sure we don't run into any wheelchair scenario or thing like that. But I think we are confident. Inspector, that person we met on Monday, he explained that to meet expect standard is something quite hard to get already. Exception is exception. It's just like the effort.
And then, sorry, my second question was around part-time timetables. And I was surprised to read that there wasn't already, that a policy needs to be drafted, because my understanding is there are a lot more part-time timetables than there used to be. So when are we expecting the policy to be?
Policy I've been making, I would think probably by the end of this summer. Jamie is here contributing. What do we want to do? We want to analyze the data to understand what data tell us. I give you an example. I think compared to national average, actually we are lower. In the southeast, actually we are one of the lowest, but it's increasing. That's what worries us. I think what we want to focus on in our guidance, I already talked to manager, Asian welfare, and now sit with Jamie's team. We all work together. It's not just rely on one team. One thing we want to focus on is safeguarding. School need to be made aware, probably not all school aware. Even a child is attending part-time, the other time when child stay at home, it's still school's responsibility. So whether school have make an arrangement or not, so we want to highlight that area. I give you an example in our guidance. Another thing is how long the part-time timetable. Nationally, there's a norm, normally after 6 weeks, you need to review again. So our guidance will focus on that area as well. So we already have some things emerging. We're going to work. I expect in the next 3 months, we will have a clear guidance, like we can socialize with the school leader, and we collectively not just rely on HQ welfare service to support school to make sure that get this mechanism right. I'm not saying all part-time table are not appropriate. Some are probably needed for integration, but I think we want to make sure they are safeguarded. Parents are fully participate in the decision making, not just schools that we want your child to be on a part-time timetable. Yeah. I hope that answers your question. We'll try to get it in the next 3 months.
So I just wanted to come to you. I was just going to ask about that as well, in the sense that for academies with this policy, what power will the local authority have over the academies to adopt the policy? Will it be optional, or will they have to go adopt it?
They definitely can't be optional, at least because it relates to safeguarding. There also this Education Act in order to getting parents' consent, because we now want to find out, or probably what we have heard from at the moment is from school at the moment. Probably we now want to reach out to the parents as well. When you child plays in part-time table, how much are you involved? Did you actually genuinely consent to that or not? So all those are under the safeguarding in education regulation, not directly mentioned part-time table, but unless something is legal duty under Director of Education, Director of Children's Services.
Yeah. And can I just, is there any evidence so far that there are people being forced onto part-time timetables where they don't, like the parents don't think that's in the best needs of the child, but it's I guess the school putting that.
We don't have any evidence of ARB, but the EWOs, Education Welfare Officers, do meet with their school leaders on a assembly basis, and they review part-time timetables, and we talk about the fact that a child should not be on a part-time timetable for behaviour. It should not. The child should not. It should be negotiated with the parents, and there has to be a real need of why the child's on a part-time timetable, and gradually that timetable should be increased to full-time. But it should not be done on behaviour reasons alone.
Thank you. I suspect there probably is some correlation between those schools, just looking at them known, one of them is near my ward, St Sebastian's, that are only just kind of meeting the expected standard and not getting kind of very much higher and towards the stronger standard with budget deficit and, obviously pupil numbers. There must be a correlation with that. Have you found that? And I mean, obviously looking at the future with looking at PAN numbers and hopefully how you will support those schools to then improve to kind of achieve some of those more stronger standards going forward.
Yeah, we have engagement with all schools. We have engagement with all maintained schools. Our academies are different. They will either decide to engage or not. It really depends on the mats. And some mats are more engaging than others. Some mats have more, they'll have their own school improvement teams and they will work with their schools. But yes, there is a correlation, most likely. Yeah.
As we all know, I love looking at the NEET data. And I have been very challenging on NEET over the last 12 to 18 months. So I just wanted to comment that it's great to see that it's still travelling in the right direction. That's really good to see.
That's down to the team. They work extremely hard. And I think we're still in quintile 2. And very close to probably just getting into quintile 1. Very close. Yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to have a bit of understanding how this local authority multi-academic trust is going to work. It looks like a hybrid. So how is it going to work? What's the driver? The local authority multi-academic proposal, does it compare with what we currently have? And how is it going to work? Because at the moment, academies are separate from local authority.
Yeah.
Now, so I'm just wondering how it's going to work.
Setting up our own local authority.
Yeah.
We had a meeting with our DFE a few weeks ago. It's very early stages, very, very early stages. The DFE, there is no guidance out yet. So we don't know what it would look like. If there was a local authority trust, again, we don't know how big that should be, whether we've got our 16 schools, whether the local authority will accept all 16. We don't know whether all 16 will want to take part in that, but it would have to be very much like a multi-academy trust, where systems and structures, just like with a local authority, with a multi-academy trust, those systems and structures need to be put in place in a local authority trust, such as financial officer or CEO, or the staff in the workforce has to be there. But also there has to be, I think you were talking about these schemes of delegation and in terms of governance.
Can I just add on that? Yeah, by nature, it isn't such a thing, a local authority trust. It's more about local authority established trust, because the current legislation said, once you set up a trust, local authority is not allowed to have a 19.9% more than that stake. So you still, basically, it's a trust. It's just like a short while ago when you set up a circle trust or whatever, in local trust. But the people who established that, put the resource in, put money invest in, it's local authority. So people describe the local authority trust, but actually not. Then, when we check with the DFE, they said unlikely. A lot of local authorities ask whether they can change that legislation, 19.9 limit. They said unlikely they can be changed, but probably they will make some kind of flexible arrangement, how give local authority more power in terms of making certain decisions in the trust that local authority maintain. But again, they said that by the end of this year, they will give some idea what that flexible power the local authority can have. Otherwise, at the moment, some local authority show interest out of the confirmation that government not going to change 19.9% cut. Many local authorities again pull out because they need to put in a lot of money and the resources to set up a trust, and you need to hand over to another body to run it. Just give you some context, something like that. So we want to explore and maybe some benefit in it.
We can bring more information as soon as we know the next meeting, if you're interested.
Yeah, because I'm actually more confused with the explanation, because at the moment you have multi-academies separate from local authority maintained school. So why do you want to have local authority multi-academy?
This is a kind of philosophical point that the government previously wouldn't allow local. So you were either a local authority maintained schools or you went into a MAT. The government wants everybody to be in a MAT, but they've said that one of those MATs could be effectively. It's a bit like having a local authority company. It's an arm's length organisation that would be a MAT. What the impression I've got out is that there are 16 schools that are left would look quite like to stick together, and so they're interested in exploring this. And our position as administration is that we're happy to explore it because we're waiting for the guidance, and there's no point in saying no until you know what it can look like, or yes. So we'll wait just to see what's in everybody's interests when the guidance actually comes out. We have no idea what it looks like at the moment.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to bring more information, because at the moment, some people complain about academy and they want local authority controlled. So it looks to me, ultimately, there will be no local authority control school. There will be multi-academy. Maybe some are independent, some are local. I'm not sure.
At risk of asking a really ridiculous question as well, in theory, obviously these are all local maintained schools which are joining together. Where there are single academies, could a single academy join a local authority academy trust? So
A single academy trust, a SAT. We've got 2 SATs in the borough. Yes, they could, but it would be a new kind of like trust.
Okay.
Yeah. SATs and MATs and LATs and all
Yeah.
of that. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yes, I think we welcome updates when there's a bit more clarity when it comes. But no, that's very appreciated. Are there any other questions on those? Great. So I know it's sort of mentioned, but did anyone have any questions on the dashboard items below as part of that report? Yeah, Moses.
So I think it goes back to the question I asked before about these EHCPs. So we still have a situation that 32% are still outside these statutory timelines. So what is the time frame to achieve full legal compliance?
I'll take that if that's okay. So just to introduce myself, firstly, sorry for not being there in person. One of the things that I'm coming to talk to about the SEM reform plan is we're working at a relentless pace. So there'll be a lot of work this evening and into tomorrow. So that's why I can't be there today. But just to introduce myself, I'm Jamie Conran, the Acting Service Director for SEND. So EHCPs, as much as it's a partnership, the service that delivers statutory EHC plans and as part of the responsibility for timeliness sits with me. So I think you're quite right. We do report generally, and that's how we do up and down the country. That's how we're asked to report, is in terms of how timely have we been. We have been on a journey of recovery. So we restructured the SEND team towards the summer and autumn of 2024 to increase the capacity, to make sure that we were more able to respond to the increased demand that was coming into the system. And we essentially built from the ground up a whole new SEND team. And we inducted them and did a long period of training from January 2025 onwards. And what you will see over time is our timeliness for EHC plans has been recovering. So we've been going up sometimes there's some wobbles. We had a wobble around January of this year where we had our SEND inspection, which was obviously huge activity that takes place over 3 weeks. But we've consistently been on a trajectory upwards. The ambition, of course, is to have 100% EHCP timeliness, but the complexity of that is that it's not just down to one service. So it's not just down to the SEND team, it's not just down to the education psychologists. We've also got a health provider, so BHFT, that provides speech and language, occupational therapy, physio. There's different partners in our system that provide statutory advice, which if there's a delay in any part of that, it contributes to a delay overall. So we are on a trajectory upwards. The ambition is, of course, 100% timeliness. We are working towards developing, and the council is investing in delivering services that will help our teams to be more timely. So we're looking at the moment at a thing called a SEND portal. Now they're in development in other parts of the country where essentially it's an online portal, which is almost a front door for EHC needs assessment requests. And if I give you an analogy, you buy something online and it says where, order received, and then order in progress, and then order delivered, that essentially will be what that SEND portal can do. So families will be better sighted on the progress of their EHC needs assessment request, as will partners, as will educational settings as well. So what that will also help us to do is to really pinpoint in a really granular way where there are potential barriers to timeliness, and then we work as a partnership to overcome them. So we have stood up bi-weekly, in recent months, bi-weekly meetings to keep that scrutiny and oversight and troubleshooting approach, and it has paid off. What we're looking for now is that continued recovery and then that consistency, because historically in Wokingham Borough, we've sort of been really timely and then we drop, and really timely and drop. And what we want is that level of consistency. I hope that answers your question.
No, because
Okay.
it's not giving me a time frame to achieve 100%.
So it's an ongoing. It's going to be ongoing. I think it's the every month where we improve increases our rolling average for the year. So we have to essentially get to 100% and then sustain that. That's going to be really ambitious and really challenging to achieve. Not many partnerships in the country achieve that. I think the national average is hovering around at the moment 46%. So we obviously have ambition to achieve 100% timeliness. When we don't achieve that, we are looking about how can we work with families, how can we work with educational settings to ensure that children aren't missing out as a result, or we understand what those risks are if there is a barrier to timeliness as well. So I think to put a timeline on it would be something that every overview and scrutiny will be looking at this, and every time we can come back and report on that journey. But it's not an easy thing to say we'll achieve that by September 2026, because there's so many different parts of the system that you're reliant on, or we are reliant on as a local authority in order to achieve that.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question. On this annual review, the same question I asked before, we still have 876 unrecorded and 437 missing. So how has this resulted in unmet needs or risk to children?
So that's with me as well. So we have made a lot of improvement in this area, but we know it's not enough. This came out in our SEND inspection as well, and it's one, again, I'm going to talk about this in a separate agenda item, but one of our priority action areas is around not only the quality of EHC plans, but the relationship between the quality of those EHC plans and annual reviews. So we've increased our timeliness of annual reviews from about 30% up to 50%. We know that's still 50% that we aren't processing on time. So we're pulling together a recovery plan for that. We've invested in, so the council's invested in additional staff to help with a recovery. So we're going to dedicate a senior case manager and a casework practitioner to work focus solely on annual reviews and making sure that we're working through those and processing those in the right time scale. We have good mechanisms. We've got good relationships with educational settings where they're worried about particular children. We engage in those discussions. So each school or educational setting has a linked casework practitioner that they can talk to and escalate concerns to. And we also have that open dialogue between myself, Ming, Emma will receive correspondence as well. So we're also introducing, I talked earlier about that SEND portal for EHC assessment requests and EHC plans. We're doing the same for annual reviews, because like with the education healthcare plans, we're reliant on different parts of the system to make sure that annual reviews happen on time, and we receive following an annual review, we receive that paperwork, because the timescales are very compressed. A lot of activity has to happen within very narrow legal timescales. So absolutely fully aware of the issue. We've done a lot of work to bring that data out and to understand where are those barriers to timeliness. We've invested in additional staffing to recover, and then we're investing in new systems to safeguard against when we do improve that performance, that we can sustain it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on that? Okay, thank you for all those contributions to that report. So I think the recommendations to note that report, and I think we'll maybe just include about sort of an update on the local authority maps when there's more information and things like that in the next report, if that's okay. Thank you. So the next item is on the local area SEND update. So is that back to you, Jamie?
Yes, but
great. Thank you.
I've got, as Prue said at the start, there's two sorts of really significant things that are happening at once in Woking and Borough. So the first thing that I'll talk about is just we've spoken about it already, but I'll talk through in a bit more detail around our area SEND inspection. And then if we have time, we've also got our SEND reform plan that it would be good to bring an update to. So in terms of our area SEND inspection, I won't go through the totality. I imagine everyone has read that SEND inspection outcome. But from when they came in, it was a 3-week inspection. They came in the 12th of January, and it concluded on the 30th of January. It's just worth noting again, like Emma said, the sort of breadth of that inspection, and I've got some headline figures around who inspectors spoke to, and they met directly with 6 children and young people that had been involved with co-production within the partnership. They received surveys from 28 children and young people directly, which is great to have their voice captured as part of that inspection. We had 514 responses received from families, so we're really grateful for the time that they took to contribute to our SEND inspection and the information that inspectors were seeking. And then there were over 17 multi-agency meetings with over 100 practitioners across education, health and care services, and they visited 6 different education settings as well. So we know what the outcome is. We got the grade 3, which is widespread and or systemic failings. And I suppose the point to note here, and it might be just helpful to work through what actually happens as a result. So we have to produce a priority action plan, and then we have to update our strategic plan. And the ultimate deadline for that is the 20th for all of that activity, and we'll publish it on our local offer website, so it'll be publicly available. It's the 20th of July 2026, and we will undergo or receive a monitoring inspection within 18 months. there's lots of activity that happens in between that time. It's not that they just let our partnership sort of carry on working alone. There's a lot of oversight and scrutiny that will come, and I can provide a high level timeline of that if that would be helpful for this board to note before they come back. So we've got 3 priority action areas. One we've already talked about, which is the ICB to lead on implementing or developing and implementing a sustainable recovery plan for wheelchair services. Our whole partnership has to develop and maintain a robust data-informed JSNA. That means Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, to truly reflect the current and emerging needs of children and young people with additional needs in Woking Borough. And then we also, as a local area partnership, must deliver a recovery plan to rapidly improve the quality and accuracy of EHC plans, and ensure that QA, so quality assurance processes across all agencies, so again as a partnership, are strengthened so that EHC plans reflect children and young people, their needs, assessed needs, and that their provision is being delivered. There are 6 areas for improvement, and that's quite common. So if even if the grade had been a 2 or a 1, there are always areas for improvement. And what I would say about those areas for improvement, we agreed and we already knew they were areas for improvement. So there was work underway for each of those areas. I think what would be helpful for the board to note, and we talked about it in pieces already, is that the work began immediately after that SEND inspection concluded. So it wasn't the case that we as a partnership waited until May, which is essentially when it was when the report was published. We knew from the feedback session, we knew the areas that they had highlighted that were either systemic and needed immediate action, or were areas for improvement and we needed to plan for. So children that were identified during the inspection as in need of an updated wheelchair or an appointment were subject to multi-agency review to understand their clinical need. The ICB immediately put in, I think it was a week after, they put in additional resource into health contracts where there were concerns highlighted. There are now NHS recovery plans in place, and that progress is being tracked and overseen. And an independent review of those concerns is in the process around wheelchair provision is in the process of being commissioned. We stood up in the week subsequent to the end of the SEND inspection, a priority action improvement programme is represented across the partnership, and Emma Cockerell as the DCS chairs that. That meets every week, and it's done so since the end of January essentially, and we've taken action to undertake what needs to happen and when, who are the owners and what are the timescales, and what does what will success look like. And then finally, we've recruited, and this is something that's going to really help to hold us as a partnership to account. We've recruited an independent chair that's going to oversee our repurposed, it used to be our strategic SEND partnership board, it's now called our SEND area improvement board. And that used to meet bi-monthly, now it's going to meet every month, and our independent chair will oversee that. So we've been producing, so each of those priority actions that we listed, we have to produce a draft, a priority action plan with all of the actions we're going to take to improve. And crucially, it's that question that I received earlier, by when, we have to absolutely articulate the by when and who is going to lead on it. So we're in the process of doing that now. We've been engaging with our DFE and NHS England advisors, because there is a sign-off process. So we have to submit our draft priority action plans formally by the 29th of June, and then with a view to publishing that on the 20th of July. And as I said, then there'll be stock takes, there'll be deep dives that happen. I think the first of our stock takes is due in December 2026. And eventually there will be a monitoring inspection within 18 months, and there'll be a full re-inspection within 3 years. So that's essentially where with our SEND inspection. I don't know whether it would be helpful to pause on that part before potentially I talk about SEND reform plan.
Yeah, I think so that we could pause for any questions. Does anyone have any questions on this so far? I've just got one, which was, and you mentioned, I think it was one of the priority actions was about the quality assurance of the EHCPs, which I think you mentioned and was brought up in the education and SEND update as well. I know that's something which there has been quite a lot of work done from previous meetings that we've mentioned. My question is, really, are we sort of confident that the internal quality assurance matches the Ofsted's view of the quality of EHCPs, and was that matching up our internal assessments and what Ofsted made of them? And I guess if that is the case, is that presented as clearly when we get that in terms of actually what that quality looks like and where it should be? And if not, if we're being maybe more optimistic about the quality, is there work to improve the quality of our quality assurance, I guess, is the question.
Thank you. I mean, the answer is yes to both, and I'll explain that. So if you look back at our reports to overview and scrutiny and the reports that we do, we knew that in general, our education parts of our EHC plan and parts where we capture the child's voice, they are strong, and they consistently come out as good or better. The areas that we knew were requiring attention and needed to be developed further were in health and social care sections of those. Now, the health part played out in our SEND inspection, and that's why there's explicit reference to health provision being tied into the quality of EHC plans in that priority action plan. So we knew of that, and we were reporting on it. In terms of is our own QA, was it strong enough, or is it robust enough? It is, and then it wasn't. And I think the learning from that and what we're embedding now in our QA framework, we're going to be essentially co-designing a partnership quality assurance framework. So it's not just sitting in the SEND service or even sitting just in the local authority. It's going to run right across the partnership and with health colleagues as well. Is that testing? So yes, we might have a good quality EHC plan, but how do we know that that provision is being delivered? And that's what the mechanism that we need to embed now in that QA framework, that actually, if we go and visit any educational setting where a child has an EHC plan, we should be able to, if all kinds of visits take place in schools or FE settings from across our partnership, we should be able to say, can you show me how that's being delivered? And that's the part that we were missing in our QA framework and our overall. So then they referenced, if you look at that priority action plan, that links to, again, like wheelchair provision, wheelchair delivery, and other aspects.
Thank you. So it sounds to me like there's two parts of it. That, am I right in thinking that the health partners are now going to be included in that quality assurance, so that everything is taken on board? And that, is it part of the quality assurance that you're now looking at whether that is implemented in the way that it should look like on the plan as well? Is that correct?
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly that. There's one thing around quality when you put it through, we've got an audit tool that speaks to compliance and quality, but actually that is obviously valuable, and that's right that we do that. But the key question for us, and that's some real learning certainly for me out of that SEND inspection, where's the assurance around it being delivered? And that's what we need to build in. And we've got plans that we've articulated in our priority action plan to submit to the DFE and NHS England, exactly that point, so that we can test.
Thank you. Emma, do you want to come in?
And I think it's about, it is exactly that what is in the plan is linked to delivery. But working with our schools in relation to their ability and capacity to make those reasonable adjustments, which some children and families fed back during the inspection that there were some settings that were better at that than others. So working to ensure, and that Jamie will go on to talk about the work that's happening in the SEND reforms, which should strengthen capacity across the system in terms of actually knowing how to enact and implement what is written into an EHCP. And so part of the feedback was that the more recent EHCPs, so particularly since we've made the changes to our SEND service, Ofsted and CQC could see the improvements in the quality of those plans versus some of the older plans and legacy plans that need to be updated in relation to the annual review process. And just to note, in terms of annual reviews, those are delegated to schools to convene, organise and complete, and then notify the local authority in terms of the update to the plan. And Jamie's mention of a portal is to make sure that we are receiving that communication, that we are tracking effectively in relation to where annual reviews should be happening, and being alongside our schools in terms of supporting in the planning and the prompting to make sure that those updates are happening to children's plans as they grow and develop, and needs change over time, and EHCP needs analysis and plans need to reflect that.
Thank you. And I guess what's come out of this as well, I guess, is that whilst the work there on the plans, actually the key thing is that plan being implemented in the way that it needs to as well, because I guess it's one thing having you could have the best plan in the world, but if it's not done as things aren't going out in the plan, then that affects children. Thank you. Moses, do you want to come in?
I didn't have a question, but you talked about developing a partnership-wide quality assurance program. Who's going to take the lead so that you don't have future systemic failures?
So that I can't see if anyone else is going to come in, so I'll just come in to start. Well, essentially, we're rooting this in the partnership. It will be that the work is going to be led by me, so I'm the senior responsible officer for this, to ensure that we do that. But again, the success of that QA or quality assurance framework will lie in the partnership coming together to make sure that we are quality assuring as a partnership. So what we saw again in the SEND inspection is we are only as good as our partnership when we come together. So it will be all of the timelines that we have said we're going to stick to, we will be held to account for. That's part of our DFE and NHS England monitoring visits when they come. And the first of which I think I said would be in December. We're expecting to have co-designed and published that revised partnership QA framework by September of 2026. And within that, we'll outline how we will be working as a partnership to quality assure. And then we'll be held to account for that, obviously by through Ofsted and NHS, but certainly it will be me leading that work. But what I would say again is there are multiple partners here that also need to own this space, and that includes educational settings, that includes colleagues in health and care, and of course the SEND service as well.
One of the things that we do, we have I forgot what I'm calling it, the area SEND board. So we have all that information in detail, so we can actually see when the EHCPs are audited, we can actually see which sections are compliant with what they're supposed to have and which ones aren't. And the drive is sort of on that granular basis of which, as Jamie said, I think earlier, we're quite good at describing the education that's required, the education setting and the needs of the child, but some of the bits quite a lot of the time there isn't a health component or there isn't a social care component, but sometimes there is, and we're not very good at being legally compliant with what we put in there. So it might be information in there, but it doesn't meet all the requirements that are actually laid down. So we might get very close, but not quite. So it's that level of detail that's being looked at the moment.
Thank you. So I think that's all the questions on that section. So were you going to talk about, did you want to mention about the SEND reform? Is that correct?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
How long, just a steer, how long do we have in terms of the agenda, or have we gone over it already?
I would say we can have, if it's just an update, maybe sort of five minutes or so, would that be all right?
Okay, I'll be ultra concise. So I think with the local area SEND reform plan, another significant area of transformation and change, and for context, we were asked, so as part of the school's white paper, which was I think announced in February 2026, there was a component within the school's white paper around driving mainstream inclusion and bringing SEND to the forefront, but really support, how do we work with and support children that learn differently within a mainstream context, while recognizing there will always be children that might require specialist support or support through an education healthcare plan. And part of the ask that then came subsequently was for every partnership up and down the country to produce a local SEND reform plan. And the timescales were very, very compressed. So the first draft that we had to produce was by the 15th of May, 2026. And the final draft for submission, the final version for submission will be this Friday, so the 19th of June. Now, for context, we've done a huge undertaking of working in as with the SEND inspection, we cannot approach SEND reform in isolation or solely as the local authority. So we've engaged over 50 partners to produce where we're at now, which we've got a draft SEND reform plan. Those partners range from FE settings, social care colleagues, multi-academy trust CEOs, school SENCOs, adult social care. There'll be many more. SENDIAS, our parent carer forum, our participation service have really helped. We've got young experts that have contributed. Children and young people have completed surveys. So we've done a really comprehensive within the time available engagement of driving what do we want to see in Wokingham SEND reform plan. And there are significant stakes at play. So we get investment for one part of the SEND reform plan, which is called Experts at Hand. But successful sign-off of our SEND reform plan, which has to go on when it's sent on Friday, it goes through local DFE and NHS England advisors, and then it goes through a number of layers, ultimately up to the Secretary of State, I believe, for sign-off, which would happen in mid-September. If that's successful, they will contribute up to 90% to write off our high needs block deficit. So there are significant stakes at play, but behind that, with the work that we're articulating in the SEND reform plan is exactly what we're all here in the room for. It's achieving the best outcomes for children and young people with additional needs. But we do know that we need funding and the right level of funding to support that and achieve that. So I'll talk very briefly in terms of just to paint a bit of a picture of what we are articulating in our SEND reform plan. So there's a thing called a universal offer. So that's an offer that we've got currently at the moment. It's called ordinarily available provision. That's in our earlier settings, and it's also in our primary and secondary settings as well. They're really high quality documents, but what they don't do is they don't reach across into sort of what's a universal offer from therapies, for example. And so what we really want to do is use that universal offer to establish that consistency across Wokingham Borough. So we've got some educational settings that do this fantastically well, and families feed that back. But we also know that some families or children and young people aren't quite experiencing those reasonable adjustments and that universal offer. And that's because we heard that in the SEND inspection as well. So what we're hoping that universal offer and that peer-to-peer support and working with localities of schools will really drive that consistency of offer. And then we're looking at experts at hand. So experts at hand is, in its simplest form, is an MDT. So multidisciplinary teams that are made up of education psychologists, occupational therapists, and speech and language therapists. And the purpose of those is to provide really timely and specialist support to mainstream schools in particular, where there might be signs that a child is or a young person is starting to wobble or is maybe starting to struggle, and the school, despite implementing their universal or ordinarily available offer, is not having the arrangements aren't having the impact that's expected. So we're really hopeful that being transformative for the experiences of children and young people, and to get the right support for them without recourse to what we know is quite a complicated pathway to an education healthcare plan. That remains unchanged. The statutory framework, all of the decision making for EHC plans is unchanged. But what's really going to be pumped up is that offer from experts at hand to wrap around mainstream schools as well. So there's a lot more to the SEND reform plan. There's things that we have to articulate around our sufficiency. One of the most ambitious things we're going to try and do in Wokingham is set up. We were initially describing it as an inclusion academy, and I think we're moving towards like a working title of like a SEND Centre of Excellence. And it's actually the key to this, and I think Prue mentioned this right at the start around like workforce. It's we can build places and spaces, we can upskill existing staff, but we know that particularly around OTs, speech and language therapists and education psychologists, we are going to need more. Now we are fishing, in terms of recruitment, we're fishing as a small local authority against a national where everyone is trying to recruit these. So part of our thinking is actually we need to step out a program where we recruit trainees or assistants, and we tie in with a local university and work through a program where we grow our own. And what that will help us to deliver is that sustainability in the system. So it's really ambitious, but sharing that, if you come into work for the local authority, if you come to work within a school in Wokingham Borough, you access the same kind of induction, you've got the same access to resources, so that you're really upskilled around different approaches to work with, because we've got such a variety of brilliant children and young people, and really working through that concept of a SEND Centre of Excellence that reaches right across the partnership. So we've articulated that fairly last minute in our SEND reform plan, and at quite a high level, but a really ambitious thing to do, and actually quite exciting. And I think behind our SEND reform plan is just such an opportunity to really get this right for children and young people. And what I would say is there's been a real commitment and energy from the partnership to rally around producing this SEND reform plan, irrespective of the really compressed timescales. People have given up a lot of time, but also given a lot of their expertise and experience to shape the plan that we have produced today. And we're very close to finishing it, but we're still working on it right now.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on that? Thank you very much for all of those points, and I think it's noted by the committee just appreciation for all the work that's been going on. I know it's been a incredibly demanding and busy time with everything going on, so thank you to all the officers and the teams involved with that. I think I'd be good to note, maybe possibly for a future meeting, whether the the action plan will be able to be shared with us. I know it's being completed, but and any updates on that possibly for the September meeting. But yeah, thank you. So we'll move now on to item 12, which is the family help and safeguarding update. So who's leading on that? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So obviously people have read both reports that we've submitted, but just in terms of sort of key headlines and success stories, the Family First reform is moving from design into delivery, which Prue referred to earlier on in the meeting, and we're moving to the family help pods, which is scheduled for the end of June. We are progressing really well in terms of the national reform requirements, including the development of the integrated front door, a new multi-agency child protection team by March of next year, and we've now got a new family group conference service. I think it's fair to say significant work has been undertaken over the last 6 to 8 months to help address the early help waiting lists, and including the family hubs, and obviously the expansion of the Universal Help in Early support. And actually, early help performance is improving, with the number of children waiting for targeted early help allocation reduced by more than 70%. We've seen a slight increase in children we care for, 151, which would indicate we've got more children, Wokingham children being looked after, because we've seen a slight reduction in those children seeking safety through asylum, but we still remain low in terms of our statistical and national comparators and neighbours. Placement stability remains a central priority, supported by the success of the mocking board, and there's a real sort of strong focus on consistent relationships with children, young people and their carers. We are increasing support for our care leavers with the new development of the Care Leaver Hub and an updated Care Leaver offer. In terms of education, we've had 29 young people moved from NEET into education, employment and training between April 25 and January 26, so that's a success. In terms of the quality assurance and the quality of our practice, our activity indicates that practice is improving, whilst identifying sort of areas that require any sort of strengthening or development. Workforce development remains a strong focus, and relational and systemic practice is well embedded. We've recently just had a practice week, which was hugely successful. In terms of short breaks, there's a short breaks review. I don't know, but Adam probably will want to talk to that part of the service.
So we've undertaken a review of the short breaks provision. So this is aimed for children with disabilities, additional needs around that additionality of provision. And we've changed the way that we've structured and organised that offer. And that should lead to less need for assessments and more children being able to access universal provisions. We've actually drawn in some new providers into that offer, which is a very positive bit. So a number of years ago, Woking changed the way that it delivered short breaks and moved to direct payments away from commission services. And this has seen a reversal of that to moving to more commission services, because with direct payments, families needed provisions to be able to direct pay to enter and engage in, which was part of the challenge. So we're in the early stages of that rework of that, and I would say it's very positive at the moment in terms of those new organisations that bring a varied mix of provision for children with additional and that additionality.
Okay, and then just in terms of sort of an executive summary on the data that we have submitted, I think Q4 shows a broadly improving performance. Got a strong timeliness in key areas. You will note that the child protection demand has reduced. There's been a reduction in children subject to child protection plans in this last quarter by 13%. We have fewer children who are subject to child protection plans and improved outcomes for our care leavers. As I said earlier, early help timeliness is within target, and also assessment timeliness within our front door has improved. There are other issues that as a leadership team we will continue to focus on. As noted in the data set, you'll see that front door demand is rising. And as I said earlier, more working children entering into care. We need a stronger focus on statutory timeliness and the focus on return home interviews and engagement with children and young people will need an area of focus. Workforce recruitment and retention is a strength, and certainly the reduction of our use of agency workers. So really the priority for the next period is to maintain progress through our family help and integrated door reforms, strengthen core practice standards and improve the response to missing children, and continue to build on a permanent workforce, and also support the workforce through the significant changes, as Prue alluded to, moving to a new space, which is greatly appreciated. The feedback has been incredibly positive. We're all together, can collaborate together, so that's great. But also we're now into the next stage of practitioners and social workers moving into their new pods. So it is a time of significant transition.
Thank you. Are there any questions here?
Yeah, so the 151 children we care for is the highest number it's been for quite a while. I mean, I know we're talking small numbers. Do we know what's driving that?
We're doing some analysis on that, because what can happen is there was a significant increase in children subject to child protection plans, probably 18 months, 2 years ago. And what people see, you see that throughput of those children who are subject to child protection plans, who then, in order to, to safeguard them, become looked after. But we're doing a needs analysis to look at those cohort of children, whether they've just come in through the front door, or they were subject to child protection plans, or have been known some years ago to children's social care, and there's been, a fresh assessment. So yeah.
Sorry.
I was just going to add, it's in the data, but also the other bit that's relevant there is there's a reduction in children seeking safety for asylum as well. Yeah. And part of that analysis is looking at those working and resident children that are coming into care and understanding that part as well.
Thanks, Adam. We talk a lot about the importance of workforce stability and how important it is for supporting working children. But the 12-month rolling turnover of qualified social workers seems to have jumped over the last 6 months. Again, do we know that's on page 64, dashboard 7. Sorry, the turnover, unless I'm misunderstanding it, the turnover of permanent qualified social workers seems to have dramatically increased over the last 6 months. And I thought we were moving to more stability. Have I misunderstood?
So there is a workforce steering board where we review this, and there is a report that we look at in terms of attrition rates and people moving. And it tends to be, when we do the exit interviews, that people are moving either for personal reasons to other local authorities or for promotional reasons, as opposed to not being happy working in Wokingham. So there's no concerns about in terms of staff sort of well-being and working in Wokingham. It tends to be for personal reasons, travel and promotional reasons.
Okay, so I understand that, and that's great. But how do we balance that increase in turnover for those good reasons with offering stability to children? Does that make sense?
No, it does. So we have a very strong. So we've now got got the academy. We've got a very strong pipeline through the assisted year of education. So the newly qualified social workers. We've also this year seen 4 apprenticeships come through. We're going to we're putting other staff. I think it's 4 again this year through the apprenticeship scheme. So that sort of sense of grow your own. So some of these staff have been in Wokingham and very committed to Wokingham for a long time. So it seems absolutely right that we invest in their sort of career pathway in terms of becoming a qualified social worker. We're also reviewing as well as our career progression policy, not just for social workers, but for all practitioners, bearing in mind we're sort of an eclectic workforce with residential home workers, family support workers, so yes.
Just the other thing to note is that with the change in our structure, that increased the number of management roles, and we've had some internal promotions. So they will have left social work roles but still be with us. So we can, I think, for the next report, we can have a bit more of a detailed analysis in relation to that, and also might help to see the actual numbers. Because sometimes in Wokingham, as with our children, in relation to our workforce, if it's a small change, it can represent quite a sizable percentage shift. So we just, in terms of being able to reflect that more accurately, but I think it would be good for us to reflect on the amount of internal promotions that have been made through our new system in relation to reflecting on that. And we've also had some I think 4 locum social workers and managers transfer to becoming permanent as well. So that's another signal that that kind of things are, you know, people feel that Wokingham is a place where they belong, but it's something that we can never be complacent about. And certainly the feedback from the move upstairs from the last that happened yesterday, the teams are feeding back very positively about their new work environment and how that will help and support them working together more effectively.
I just add, because previously when we've looked at this and going back the low numbers, is we've had just below 100 social workers, it used to be the FTE, and so one moving can actually impact it more than 1%. So the small movements can create a significant shift in the picture, but it's still important to be on top of it. But it's just those that the numbers sometimes help sort of decode it.
No. I was just going to ask about the the missing from home episodes, which I think is number 6. I think my perception of this changed a bit from the corporate parenting board meeting, when I think some of this was explained a bit more actually what this meant, because my perception of it always was, looking at this, that children missing from home, that was someone who'd run away and not returned for ages or something like that, which I think from the corporate parenting board meeting, actually, it's not always like that. Sometimes it might be coming back later than was agreed, or and things like that. So I guess my question is, how are these cases all the most kind of severe cases, or is there a mix of like some quite the most serious and some quite, what I would say, the more minor cases? And within that, because I know there's some issues in terms of the return home interviews and things like that, are those interviews less like, are those where they're not where they're more reluctant? Is that in the less severe cases, or is it actually in the more severe cases where they're not accepting those interviews, if that makes sense?
I think that the conversation we're having in the co-parenting board was so historically we used to have two categories. You used to have absent, you used to have missing. And absent was more about a child not being where they were meant to be at a certain time, and missing was when they were late and they may have been more significant. That changed a few years ago to the single category of missing. So everything gets categorised by the police if it's reported in terms of that. But this will reflect all those episodes in terms of that. And I think it's difficult around the return home interviews. Sometimes it can link to the age in terms of the engagement and how people have viewed it in terms of the young person's severity. But it's that bit about that endeavouring to try and do that engagement, because it's that process of understanding, learning, and that relationship in terms of understanding what the pull and push factors are around that child maybe not being where they're meant to be.
Just to note that there are two separate stats here. So there are children missing from home. So those are children who are living at home with their parents or with family, and then those missing from who are in our care, just in terms of making that distinction. So for those children missing from home, that might be the first time that we start to signal, or that child starts to signal to the system that there are other things going on for that child, and we might need to intervene. So that's part of that review. And then obviously for children who are in our care, we have a responsibility for those, but that just in terms of explaining the data.
Thank you. Yeah, so the children missing from home, are they sometimes children who might not have been on the radar but then become on the social care radar as a result of that episode or something like that? Yeah. Thank you. Are there any other questions on any of this?
We did have a question, but Jane asked it, so you've got off.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that report and those updates there. So we'll move on now to the item 13, which is children and young people's participation and engagement strategies. I think that'd be Jo.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to present it to you. I'm going to focus on the sort of executive summary page, and then I'll skip forward to a few of the highlight projects. So just as a bit of background for those who haven't met me before, I'm Participation Manager for Children's Services. I've been in my post since April 2025, and in that time we've built a participation team and a participation service, which now includes an officer, a child and family advocate, and our young experts team as well. And I know those of you who are also part of the corporate parenting board will have met some of our young experts there. The participation strategy was one of the first pieces of work after I started. So we published it, I think, probably August time, 2025. And you've asked me for a review of the strategy up to this point. Just as a kind of very high-level overview of the strategy, it's obviously based around the UN Convention for the Human Rights of the Child, and particularly in the Article 12, obviously the right to express their views and be considered, and their thoughts and feelings be considered in all matters affecting them. The participation model that we use in the strategy is the Lundy model, and that has sort of four very kind of simple ingredients to get right in participation. So space, voice, audience, and influence. And if all of those are really strong, you should have really effective participation for children and young people. And we also had 4 key aims, which were around inclusion, influence, growth and empowerment, and trust and respect. And if you want to read the full participation strategy, it is on the Tri-X. So if you just Google Children's Participation Strategy Wokingham, it should come up and you can read more of the detail. Just in terms of an overview, the participation groups that we run have been running smoothly, and most of them run monthly. So we have our 2 Children in Care Council groups, which have been named, the name chosen by the groups themselves is Aspire. So we've got a nice new logo as well, which the children designed. And we have a younger group, which is for ages 7 to 12, and then an older group for 12 to 17 or 18. And then we also have a care leavers forum as well. So once they turn 18, they can move to care leavers forum. We also have our youth council, which I presented to you last meeting, so I won't spend too much time talking about the youth council tonight. And we're also developing our participation officer in the SEND offer within the SEND space as well. So I reviewed the participation groups with children and young people in April, so I'll come on to that, but they've given us some ratings against those 4 key objectives that we had in the strategy. And some of the outcomes, some of the things we're really proud of that our groups have been involved in are some of the young person friendly materials that they've helped to produce, access to services, and coming up with some amazing solutions to real life issues, just asking a question and getting a brilliant response of this is how it should be done. It's amazing what they come up with. They've also worked with the wider partnership, so the neurodiversity screening tool, the child and care CAMS materials, Health Watch have been to work with our participation groups, and our care leavers have also been involved in designing the new hub, which we just heard about earlier. So this week we'll be looking at some of the fixtures and fittings, choosing colours, really kind of making it their own personal space. That they want to spend time in ultimately after it's been developed. That we also work on projects that the groups bring to us. So we know that we're always going to have people who come to us and say we need to find out what children and young people think of this, or we're changing a policy, we're changing a plan, and we need their views. But we want them to be leading and directing the work that they do and what they think is important to them. So our youth council have led groups like the debate night, the book group, which they've just started. We've got our amazing Black Hair and Skincare Guide, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. And our Children in Care Council at the moment have had a fantastic idea to design a blanket for new children coming into care that has beautiful messages and drawings that they want to send, so that on that first night the child could sort of wrap themselves up and feel like they were they were being loved and cared for. So we're just working on that at the moment, and I'm sure some of you will see the results of that very soon. And often those pieces of work are the ones that are really kind of just bring such success and joy to everybody around them as well. In terms of outcomes for children and young people, the confidence and building skills was recognised as a strength by the young people we work with, and developing relationships with their peers. And that was something that came out from all of our groups, how important that was to them, and to have like-minded people and people with similar experiences that they can relax with, they can have a laugh with, they can get to know them, but they can also do some really important work at the same time. And they also told us how proud they are of the influence that they've had on the things that matter to them as well. A highlight from this year is that our young experts, we applied for a Quorum Voice Award, a national award for our programme, and they were shortlisted by the panel. We went up to Birmingham last month to do a presentation, which the young experts wrote themselves, and they stood up, they presented. I didn't need to do a thing, I just literally sat down and watched them. And that was just how much confidence they've developed in just since September to be able to do that in front of probably about 100 people in the room, their peers, as well as people leading a national organisation. And they were fantastic. So that was brilliant. But the feedback that we had from the review panel was, I've popped the quote in the report, but really just kind of highlighting how much that programme demonstrates that we in Wokingham are actively shaping our services with children and young people, and that their participation is meaningful, youth-led, and has a genuine commitment to co-production as well. So those are all really positive highlights. In terms of next steps, we're not perfect. We've grown the service over the year, but we know we've got more work to do. So in the coming year, we'll be focusing on strengthening our SEND participation. We're developing, as I said, a series of workshops which we're planning to deliver in September in the autumn term in schools. And we've already done 5 in schools during this spring term, which have been really successful. So we want to extend that and offer it as a more regular programme. We're developing a family advisory board, so that's for families who have been involved with children's social care and who want to provide them steering and some insight from their experience. And as we move through this time, which I think everybody who's spoken to this evening has said of the change and reform, lots of changes going on, lots of things being need to be done at fast pace as well. And we want to make sure that the relationships that we have with our children, our young people, but also the people around us, the people that we work alongside and in different workforces that come together around children and young people, we want to make sure that that's really held. So we are developing, actually we just delivered it for the first time today, a participation training which we've done with our PYJS colleagues today to help them to think a bit more deeply about feedback, how they listen to their young people, what that means for them as a service, and we'd like to roll that out across all the teams as the new hubs form, so that we can sort of start to work more widely with our workforce as they go through a time of change as well. We want to improve the feedback loops, so making sure that we do always tell people what a difference their voice has made, and when things have changed we let them know, but we just want to strengthen that really and celebrate successes more, but also to be really challenging when things haven't changed or when people have told us that yes, this will happen, but you know, a few months have drifted by and it hasn't quite happened yet. So looking at systems and ways of making sure that that feedback loop is really embedded, not just in our team, but across all the teams that we work with. And then one of the things that came out when we spoke to our children was that for our youngest children in our Children Care Council group, their confidence in building their skills and friendship was lower than our other groups. And so since we had that insight from them, we've really been focusing on, you know, it's very play-based anyway, lots of games, lots of kind of fun that we have with them, but really focusing on activities that help to build their confidence and help them to work with each other in a really positive way as well, which seems to be going well, but we will check in again with them soon and see if they feel any differently. And then increasing the diversity in our participation groups and reaching out to some of our young people that we know we're not hearing from in those groups at the moment, and we've got some plans for how we're going to do that over the summer. And then really kind of looking more at the analysis of the work that we do, and not just within our own participation activity, but how that feeds into feedback which is being collected across other teams. When we look at advocacy themes, complaints, compliments that we receive, and how we can sort of bring that together a bit more. At the moment, it can be a little bit disparate. So we want to make sure that as a service, we are helping to kind of shape that feedback from across other teams as well. I will just briefly skip forward to the slide. So a couple of kind of highlight projects that I just wanted to tell you about in a bit more detail. I mentioned the hair and skincare booklet, and I have got a couple of copies here. If anyone wants to have a flick through, you're more than welcome to kind of pass that around and have a flick through. One of our young experts, through her own experience, came to me and shared that when she was in foster care, she had quite a difficult experience with her own hair and skin, and her foster carers didn't really understand how to care for her hair, what products she needed, and she didn't feel that she could bring it up. She felt like some of those things are quite expensive, quite time consuming, and she didn't want to rock the boat by asking for certain things that she needed. So she has put together this amazing guide which goes into quite a lot of detail about all different hair types, styling, products, skincare, And we've obviously had some copies printed, which every children's home and foster caring family in Wokingham now has a copy of in their home, a hard copy. And we are, I think I've invited all of you, or all of you whose details were publicly available on the website, to come and join us for a drop-in lunch to come and celebrate the kind of official launch of the booklet. Destiny, our young expert, will be there. We'll also have a hairdresser who's coming to demonstrate some styling advice. We'll have some lunch, we'll have some nibbles, and we've also invited foster carers to come down. So if people do have questions for Destiny, or they want to know more about the project and what we're planning to do with it next, then you're more than welcome to come along and join us for that launch event in a couple of weeks' time. And then just coming on very briefly to the self-assessment by the participation groups. We meeting our aims? I kind of looked at it that 90% and over I was happy with. Anything below that we needed to do something to address it. And generally, the feedback was very good. The one element that was a bit lower than the others was children and young people help to shape what services look like and services to develop to reflect real needs. So sometimes that might be to do with young people not hearing enough about the changes that they've made. So that's for us to make sure we keep going back to them and looking at really providing that feedback in a meaningful way, and also setting expectations when we do have people who come in to join our group. If they're from, for example, a health service and they want to come in and meet with our young people, me being really clear about what the expectations are in terms of, yes, you can do that, but in 3 months' time, we need to hear what you've done as a result of that, and we need you ideally to come back and tell young people that yourselves. But if not, that we receive a full kind of response to the feedback that they've been able to give you. So has anyone got any questions or anything else you'd like me to focus
on? Okay. Well, the document has got a lot of information on the activities and desired outcomes. I'm just wondering, what steps do you take to ensure that this participation is inclusive, reaches all groups, particularly like SEND and minority groups?
So it is different depending on which of the groups that we are talking about. For example, with the SEND participation group in school, obviously we're able to ask teachers to specifically invite children that are on there who have EHCPs or who have additional needs. With our youth council, it is open to every child and young person in Wokingham who attends a secondary school or who lives in Wokingham, even if they're attending outside of mainstream schools or educated at home. So they are, to a certain extent, a self-selecting group of young people. We do advertise, we've got posters, and we have our 2 members of Youth Parliament who were elected through a democratic process, and they're putting together a kind of set of slides which they're going to use in school assemblies to be able to kind of promote the group and bring more people in. For our children in care councils, most of our kind of referrals come through foster carers. So they will either, contact us, or they'll already, often they're fostering more than one child. So there may be a child that they've fostered that we have previously had in the group, and then the next foster children that are coming to be with that young person, they will kind of bring them through, and also social workers, obviously. So it's really about us getting the word out and talking to our teams, our social work teams, but also more widely with our foster care community to tell them about what we're doing. And we've started producing a monthly newsletter. So that is the young people as well that are feeding into that newsletter to tell our children and our carers and our social workers about what it is that the groups are working on, what their achievements are, some of the things that the children themselves would really like to bring to the attention of people who are caring for them, essentially.
Thanks, Jo. my first question you answered in your presentation. An observation, well done on being shortlisted for the Young Expert Award, which the inclusion one's been asked, but brings me on to the training we went to where there were 2 young experts who I thought were really impressive. So I'm not surprised you're being put forward for awards. That one you've answered. Oh, small question. Trialling action cards with 2 new groups. What are action cards?
Thank you, Luciani. I forgot I turned it up. That's something that we picked up from another local authority. Jamie, and I don't know if Jamie's still online now, I think he's gone. Jamie Conran and I were part of a kind of learning community for SEND participation. And one of the other local authorities that we're in that community with use action cards. So when I think the way that they do it is that you have to have 3 young people who kind of sponsor an action, and that card gets assigned to an individual. So it might be that I was saying to you, Jane, you know, this one's for you. You obviously have to accept that that's an action that I'm giving to you, and then I would give you the responsibility of the timeline to come back to me with a response or with an answer to how things have moved on. And Jamie is there, I can see him. And Jamie, that was really successful, wasn't it, for the local authority that used that method, that it's a kind of quite simple way of getting responses in a timely manner, but it sits with a named individual rather than with a service as a whole to provide the next steps on the actions.
And it's published, sorry, I don't know if anyone's speaking, but just to jump in, that it's published as well. So it becomes quite a nice sort of over time, you said we did. So where young people are raising issues for the partnership or for particular services, the response, there's an accountability there to come back, and the action card is only closed if those young people agree that the action has been addressed sufficiently. So it's a really nice system to adopt.
That really hit home. A voice only matters when it leads to action. And I was wondering, I mean, not necessarily for tonight, but how we reflect as a group in terms of how we deliver on that as a group in terms of feeding back. And again, it says somewhere, I can't find the page now, but you said we did is great, but it is at risk of becoming cliched, isn't it? Because you see it in a lot of places. So we really do need to make sure we deliver. I kind of thought you were doing our job for us, scrutiny and but I thought there was some really interesting themes came up there, and I wondered if over time at future meetings we could pick up some of them and look at what the answers are to those questions, because they're all pertinent questions. And yeah, that was me.
Thanks, Jane.
Yeah, so the work that they do across all of the groups is fantastic. My question is, are there any significant barriers that are stopping them from getting further at the moment, do you feel? Because, like I say, the impact that they're having on those of us who are interacting with them has been really big. And is there anything we can do to sort of remove barriers to stop that from spreading further?
To be honest, I think that the participation activity is really, really well supported in Wokingham, as from the leadership team to the people who are delivering services. I feel like I'm pushing on an open door most of the time, so that's great. And likewise with these meetings, when I'm invited to attend with members as well, you know, I feel like you're all very supportive of what the children and young people want to do and want to achieve. So yeah, I'd just like to continue to be able to share with you, and if there is anything that I feel this would benefit from your oversight, perhaps I can propose to come back and raise your attention to it.
I was just going to ask as well. I mean, I think it's really interesting with the are we meeting our aims? I mean, it's overall really positive. I think with those. I think what's noticeable as well is that it's really positive with the young experts, and I think that's. I don't know whether you agree that. From what I've heard from all the things, I think they've got a lot more buy-in to the things because they've got that engagement. I know it's a bit different because they are technically employed as well, aren't they?
Well, they're not employed. We pay them,
Okay.
but they are on casual worker contracts.
Okay.
So, yes, I mean, and partly that is because we're able to invest so much more time because we have that time with them. You know, we are paying them. We can expect a certain number of hours a week that we have with them. So being able to really kind of spend that time developing their skills, talking to them, learning from, you know, about their needs and helping and supporting them to be able to, you know, meet their own expectations as well as the really interesting and exciting project work that they're doing. But I also think they've had that time to develop a team themselves, and they feel really part of their own group of young experts, part of our participation team, which they love, but also part of the wider team as well. And yeah, I think if we could do the same for all of our young people, that would be amazing. But, you know, it's something that I would love to grow at some stage.
Yeah, my thoughts with that. I mean, I think there's lots of clearly really tangibly great things like this. I think is fantastic, and I think that's, you know, a good example of someone's had sort of real vision and that sort of autonomy and control to do something really positive. And I think, well, I'm sure they're rightly proud of what they've produced, and it's kind of a legacy as well, which they can leave for others. I wonder where it's a little bit lower with things like the youth council. I know there's lots of things that the youth council do in terms of consultation and feedback and things like that. I wonder whether are there any things that the youth council do? I don't know, where we take a bit of a risk of giving them complete control over a decision or something. I'm not suggesting something huge, but whether not the budget for the whole council, but whether there's anything, because I think that I don't know, for young people, I think that feeling of having control, doing something which will really make a difference. Obviously, it can't be the budget of the whole council, but
well, they were consulted on that. They were consulted on that,
but I think that feeling, but I think those consultations, I think they can feel like things happen, but when it's such a big thing, I suspect that's where maybe, you know, that voice is one of so many, and whether there's anything where, I don't know, where we just leave it completely to them. And
I mean, I think they would love that. Our next youth council meeting, they want to focus on volunteering, and they've also been part of the skills strategy, but that is something that they really are passionate is around youth employment skills. If there was something in that area, I think that they could kind of have more of a direct influence on, they would be really keen to kind of get involved in something like that. But I know we've also spoken as part of the youth offer work about things like designing playgrounds and new housing developments and things like that, where actually they probably are just looking for a focus group of young people that could come along and do a piece of work like that with them. So that's kind of on the horizon as well.
Yeah, I think there's something, because then it's something that they can, I say, take ownership of. Actually, that's something they've, no, great. Are there any other questions on that? Excellent. Thank you very much. There's a huge amount going on. So thank you so much for all those updates. So I'll move now on to item 14, Children's Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. So,
That's me. So I'll make an assumption that the report's been read, but I think it's quite helpful if I just kind of give a bit of context as to how we've got from the start to where we are today. So last summer, we within the council, within the partnership, we spoke about having a joint strategic needs assessment that kind of reflected the needs of children and young people in our local area that was Wokingham specific. And we held a partnership event back in September to start to think about what that would look like, how would we do it, how would we structure it. And we looked at various examples from other local authority areas, what did we like about them, and out of that came a decision that we would actually structure our JSNA around the 8 Marmot principles as a Marmot borough. So that was kind of the very start of the kind of journey, and from that we developed a task and finish group that was representative of many partners across Wokingham, education, health, the police, our NHS providers, and the ICB being a joint strategic needs assessment. And we, between kind of November and now, we have been looking at the 8 chapters and the 49 sections that are contained within those 8 chapters to think about what is it that we want to reflect in this joint strategic needs assessment around our children and young people. And I think it's important to know it's not the only document that we should be using to understand the needs of our children and young people. It's a high-level document. It's a strategic document, and we need to understand that there's a kind of wider evidence base that will sit alongside it, where we do our deep dives, we have our kind of needs assessments into specific areas. But what the JSNA will give us is kind of what is the kind of high level understanding of those particular sections and the chapters, and then what does that tell us around needs of children and young people? What are the strategic implications as a result of that data, information and insight? And then what are we going to do about it? And I think that is the most important thing. It's a really good lever for us as a partnership to start to look at what does that mean. So now that we have this kind of high level understanding of the needs of our children and young people, how does that translate into action? So out of that will fall a joint strategic plan between the partnership, and you'll see, as Jamie talked earlier and Prue talked earlier around the send inspection outcome, one of the areas of priority action is around a JSNA, the development of a JSNA. We have committed within that action plan to have a joint strategic plan that falls out of that. So we're collectively looking at what do we need to do as a partnership, how do we align resources and our planning about how we use the funding that we have to meet need. But we've also committed to undertaking a deep dive. So from the analysis that we're doing, what is that going to be telling us? And do we want to, does that tell us enough, or do we need to be more curious and do a bit more of a deep dive? So we'll have a kind of strategic plan around that as well. So in terms of the timeline, we are between kind of November and March, we had our first draft of the chapters. We've been refining the kind of first draft between kind of March and July, and then we will be going through a quality assurance mechanism to make sure that our chapters are framed consistently, that they all look at inequalities, which is a golden thread throughout the document, that we're looking at the strategic implications for each chapter and what does that mean, so that, you know, I manage the commissioning team at Wokingham, so it will help inform how we plan and provide services going forward. So we will do that over the summer for it to then be ratified and adopted and published in September. It is the JSNA is it's a legal document, and it's the Health and Wellbeing Board has a statutory duty to provide a JSNA, and we use the Wokingham Observatory as the place that hosts our joint strategic needs assessment alongside a range of other needs assessment documents. So yeah, if there's any questions, I'm very happy to take them. And I think in your pack you will see some draft chapters as they're emerging. They are the 11 public health chapters, and this is, I should have said at the start really, that this is a programme of work that is led very jointly between Children's Services and our public health team, as well as our health partners. Yeah, it was more an observation, and I feel quite reassured actually that I would welcome and encourage the curiosity, because when you read the document it was like, well, we're better than the national there and we're better than the national there, and then you're like, you could get complacent being better than national, and is there enough stretch and push to, although we're better than national, we want to be even better? So the curiosity and the deep dive is quite reassuring.
Yeah, and what we've tried to do as well is that we do, on the face of it, look very good. And I think that's one of our issues in Wokingham, is that, you know, it can look quite green if you were kind of doing a rag rating. And what we've really encouraged the sponsors of each chapter, so I should have said each section has a sponsor, and that could be someone from the voluntary sector, someone from education, schools,
health local authority, when we're really kind of testing that in terms of, yes, a majority of our children and young people might excel or do well in a particular area, but we actually need to move the focus, and that's why we want that inequalities piece to run across and throughout all of the chapters within the JSNA. So we are having that curiosity already, and that is going to be forming part of that quality assurance as well. Is this delivering what we thought it would do, and is this helpful? Because we don't want it to sit on the shelf. We need it to be an active document.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so is my understanding right that the JSNA has always existed, but is this is it a new way of structuring it around the Marder principles, and then is that a renewed focus on the kind of inequalities and things like that? Is that right?
Yeah. So if you go on the Woking and Berkshire Observatory, there is a JSNA on there at the moment. What we've wanted to do this time round is to have more of the focus on children and young people, but also more focus, as what I was just saying to Jane, around what about those children and young people, what about the needs of our children and young people that maybe aren't doing as well or meeting those milestones, and generally just understanding more. It is a high-level document, but we are trying to get into some of that detail within the JSNA. So we have a legal duty to have one, so we will have one, but this is a new way of doing it, of delivering it.
I just had one other point. It might be a sort of detailed point, which isn't quite here. I was just on 133. It was just something about page 133. It just sort of, I don't know whether it's my understanding, which is slightly out, or whether it needs a bit more clarity. Is it? Trying to find the bullet point. It was about physics. I think the thing that struck me was in the second bullet point: children from medium family affluence and less deprived backgrounds are more likely to be physically active than those from higher affluence or more deprived backgrounds. So that suggested to me that it was actually the ones in the middle which were more active than the ones on either side in terms of affluence. But then below it says that children from high affluence families are more physically active. I wasn't sure about.
Where's your first point?
Sorry, yeah, I didn't explain. It was kind of the second and third bullet points down where it's saying.
So children from medium family affluence, less deprived backgrounds are more likely to be physically active than those from higher affluence.
And more deprived background.
It's public health data, so I'd have to probably go back and that's why quality assurance is so important.
Yeah. Okay, that's. I was just wondering, yes,
it might be a typo. It could be a typo, but yeah, these are still in draft and they haven't gone through that quality assurance. But I think what we were trying to show is how we're structuring each kind of section of the JSNA. But yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. So we'll now move on to the next item, which is the forward programme. Does anyone have any comments on the forward programme? I think there's... yes. So I think you may have seen from emails we've got... for our next meeting in September, we've got the training beforehand at 6 p.m. Am I right in thinking that will be in person? And is it just for us or is it for other members as well? Just for this committee. Okay, so that'll be at 6 p.m. just before the meeting. Yes.
Could I ask, possibly looking at the link for the meeting afterwards, if we've got the training before, it's going to be a really long evening. And there's quite a lot, the agenda's pretty packed. And it's a lot to get through and people digest. I don't know if there's any way you could move anything onto the November meeting, which looks slightly less packed.
That is a good point.
Especially if you're trying to participate in training and then...
Yeah, we'll have a look at that and see if there's anything which can...
Okay.
Yeah. but we'll make sure there's a break between the training and the meeting as well. Yes.
Can I just come back on your previous point, because I've read it now? So the first part of the what you were saying around children from medium family affluence and less deprived backgrounds are more likely to be physically active is a Wokingham picture. The paragraph below is a national picture in England. So that's the difference. Sorry.
Great. So yes. So we've got the training. We'll have a look at those bits and see. There is quite a lot on there, but actually the way that our forward approach, there's quite a few of those standing items which also don't always take a huge amount of time. So, but we can have a look at that. So, any other comments on the forward programme? Excellent. Then we'll move on to the action tracker, which is after that. So I think there's updates on most of these. So updates on breakdown of exams, we will have that in future. I know there wasn't information on that before. The others bits are completed. We've had the SEND reform update. And there's quite a few comments there on the school place planning update. Are there any comments on the action track about things that, so that's all good. So we'll accept that. And then, which brings us on to item 17, which is the exclusion of the public. So that's under section 100A part 4 of the Local Government Act 1972. The public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of